Welcome to Far East Wargaming, bringing you another Heresy Thursday. We have been away for a month, but now we are back. We did not disappear. And once again, it's a pleasure to have Jason on the podcast.
Hey, everybody. It's good to be back. It's been a long time. I've been caught up at work and with family, and yes, a little bit of downtime, but I'm really glad to get back in the saddle again.
Yes, and so today we thought we'd touch on a few things. One of them actually pretty sensitive to the community, the Female Custodes. But before we dive into that rabbit hole, I wanted to talk a bit about what we missed from Warhammer community while we were away. And honestly, there wasn't all that much, which is kind of disappointing in the 4 weeks we've been away.
Yeah, you would have thought we would have had at least a couple announcements or whatnot, but there hasn't been a lot of things happening, and it makes for a short, I think, discussion when it comes to the Warhammer community topic. But yeah, let's dive right into these new Sentinels.
Yes, it is. So they announced the pre-order for these new Light Sentinels. We had the Aethon Heavy Sentinels already. We've seen those. They're on people's workbenches. I think, Jason, you've got that on your workbench already at the moment there. But these are the lighter versions here. And they released two of them with their rules. The Hermes Light Sentinel and also the Incursus Patent Hermes Light Sentinel, which I think is a Velataris Sentinel.
Yeah, it's two of the same. Well, I mean, I say the same. I mean, it comes in the same box, and you get a choice of which one you want to actually equip. One of them is more light, so it's your typical regular Solar Ox, and the other is the Velataris version of the Hermes Light Sentinel. I'm kind of torn about these. I mean, from a model perspective, they look pretty cool. They follow kind of the same aesthetic as the heavy Aethon. They look cool, and it's a totally new unit that we haven't seen in 30K before for the Solar Ox. So from that perspective, I like them. But as we kind of dive into the rules, I'm at a bit of a loss for what purpose they would actually serve in a Solar Ox list.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you there, but let's take a step back and actually look at the stat lines. So for the Light Sentinel, it's 50 points for 2 Light Sentinels. They are mechanized. I'm not going to go over the mechanized rules. We've talked about those in the past. They're in the book. They're movement 10, weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 3, strength and toughness 5, 2 wounds each with an initiative of 3, 1 attack, leadership 7, and only a 4+ save. You can have up to 4 other sentinels added to this squadron for 18 points a model, and you can replace their multi-laser for a Hermes grenade launcher for 5 points a model. And the grenade launcher is an 18-inch frag or crack missile there. I don't really see what you do with these. Just the ranges of the weaponry is so short. The survivability at 2 wounds, and yes, toughness 5 and strength and toughness 5 is great. But a 4+ save still for a mechanized unit.
They do move 10, which is useful, and it does say that because of the Light Sentinel rule that whenever they run, they get the Shrouded 5 up, which is pretty interesting. But I totally agree with you. I mean, when I look at these rules, the only thing that I could see a use for them as is suicide pinning, right? You upgrade to the grenade launcher, you move the 10, you shoot 18. They're not too expensive from a points perspective, so you could have, let's say, 3 or 4 of these guys. But that ballistic skill 3 means only half of those frag shots are going to hit in the first place. Well, it's actually not that because it's blast. It would be deviating as a blast, but you're still probably not going to get a great amount of hits. Yeah, I mean, if you really, really want to try to pin something, I mean, I guess that's the use for these. But other than that, I'm not really impressed kind of with the way that they're just laid out. It doesn't just seem like it fills any specific purpose in the list other than kind of looking cool and perhaps getting a lucky pinning here and there.
Yeah, it's addressed slightly with the Velataris squadron, the Hermes Velataris squadron. They're 65 points for 2. They are slower, movement 8, But they have a weapon skill of 4 and a ballistic skill of 4, and then the rest of the stat line is the same, except they also have a better save of 3 plus there. And they can change their Volkite caliber to a heavy flamer for free. But again, it's very close range, very short weaponry here. And this is an elite slot.
Yeah, I mean, these are actually a little bit more useful to me, but I do also think that the rules are kind of confusing. And what I mean by that is, in their special rules, they have Tercio, which the other light version of this walker does not have. And then they have the Storm section rule, which basically says, if you select a Velataris Tercio, you can include one of these squadron units in place of a regular Solar Auxilia Velataris Storm section unit. So what that's basically saying is you can kind of mix these with their brothers on foot. All right, sounds good in theory, but why, right? Because most of the time that you're taking the Velataris, you're taking them because you want either the axes or you're taking them because you want the Volkites, which in my opinion are more useful, but the Volkites are short range. And so I guess you could take these if you wanted heavy flamers and you wanted them kind of running up together. I think the rules are kind of confusing and kind of conflicting, because the way that I would actually use these is I would just leave them with their regular Volkite caliber. Because with that movement and the range on the caliber, 3 or 4 of these can spit out a lot of shots. And they are ballistic skill 4, and they are a little bit more durable. So they're almost like a cheap version of a Space Marine Legion support squad with Volkite calibers that have a little bit more durability. So that's kind of how I would use these. I wouldn't necessarily use them with the heavy flamer. I don't know. Again, this one is just a real weird one for me. And because it's in the elite slot, it's competing against some of the other choices in elites, right? If I'm not mistaken, the Ogren are elite. If you want to get your medic or your Medicaid detachment, or you want your Velataris guys with the axes, etc., etc. Yeah, usable, but again, I just don't think that they do anything really well.
Yeah, I think the model is really nice, and it's really nice to see. And I think we'll see them on the board. I would be interested on other people's takes on where, if you are running a Solar Auxilia or looking at running a Solar Auxilia, how you envision using these guys. Because for us, I won't say that I find them redundant, but close to it in terms of even mixing in a Tercio. You're not going to be putting your Velataris on foot. They're going to be in vehicles, which are going to be moving faster than these guys. So over the course of a battlefield, they could be left behind. I don't know. I like where they're going. Always love new models. And I'll say this, they've made their sculpt really well. And I think the entire range of Solar Auxilia, I've got to give a round of applause to Games Workshop there for what they've done with the plastic Solar Auxilia. They are beautiful models. They look a joy to paint, and they have a high level of detail. But mechanics-wise, I just don't know.
Yeah, I think probably the last comment that I would make is where I could have seen a miss on these that might have made them a bit more useful is if you'd given them something like Scout or Outflank, right? Because I mean that is actually what they're, if you look at kind of the way that the fluff is written in the rule itself, right? It talks about how they are used as fast-moving scouting units. Why wouldn't you give them Scout? Why wouldn't you give them Outflank? If you gave them something like that, I could actually see a use for the light one with the crack grenades is perhaps outflanking in and getting some lucky side shots on light armor or Whirlwind Scorpius or something like that. So to me, this was kind of a miss. You should have given them something else that might have made them a little bit more useful, in my opinion.
Well, look, that rounds up actually all there really was to discuss from Warhammer Community, because I think everything else was talking about more pre-orders, or they did mention some stuff for Legion Imperialis. We got the mini termites. Again, lovely to see. We are working on our Legion Imperialis here at Far East Wargaming, but I don't really think mini termites is worth much time in discussion.
No. I mean, it's a shame that we still haven't been able to get any terrain for Legions Imperialis. But yeah, I think we don't really need to spend much time on termites. So they're going to do whatever they say on the tin.
Yes, and now we'll move on to the more hot and sensitive topic, and that's the recent announcement or retcon of female Custodes in the Warhammer 40k and therefore in the Warhammer 30k universe here. So we're going to take a bit of structure on how we discuss this. We're going to break it down into a few parts. We're going to break it down into the current facts we have, the rumors that are out there, some potential reasons for this shift from GW, and then finally, both of our opinions here. We don't want to speculate too much. That's why we're going to try and keep the rumors as short as possible. But starting with the facts. The fact is, female Custodes have been retconned into the latest Custodes Codex in the Warhammer 40k lore. And therefore, there is present in the 30k lore, even though we have not seen anything directly connected to that in Age of Darkness just yet. Okay, Warhammer has also confirmed this and doubled down with an announcement on their Twitter page or their X page. And it is a fact that this has caused an uproar on both sides, the pro and con sides in our community. And take that how you will there. Those are all the facts we can really confirm.
Yes, and there's probably a couple more that I'll just bring out, because if you're way old school like me, and you can actually remember and played in the days of Rogue Trader and whatnot, there's actually been a few other instances that are worth noting, right? The first one is there were models for female Space Marines in Rogue Trader, okay? And we can devote an entire podcast to the history of that and whatnot, and I'm not going to repeat everything that you can find easily on the internet. But I myself owned these miniatures at one point when I played Rogue Trader. So female Space Marines for a very short amount of time were a thing. That's another fact that we need to be, recognizing. Another fact that we probably ought to recognize is that there was a lot of different varieties of Space Marines back in Rogue Trader as well. You had half Eldar, half human Space Marines. You had in the equivalent of the Solar Aux or the Imperial Army at that point, you had human bombs, which were obviously very, controversial later on. So those are some other facts to note as well, because retconning isn't a new thing, okay? As much retconning has been done in the last few years over the course of 40K or 30K, they've always retconned, always. And probably the thing to remember is, first and foremost, GW is a business. And like any business, they're going to do what it takes to increase profitability. And I could very easily see that figuring into their strategy when they do a retcon. All right. So let's be cognizant of the fact that female Space Marines were a thing, even if it was a short amount of time. This isn't a new thing that all of a sudden just exploded out of nowhere. But yeah, those facts are definitely important to recognize.
Yeah. Moving on to the rumors, and this is the part we're going to just really brush over because we don't have any contact to any of these parties, and everything is secondhand of secondhand here. The rumor for this, the reasoning behind it, is due to the Warhammer and Amazon relationship and the partnership to make a Warhammer series. Apparently, according to these rumors, Amazon wanted more powerful female characters in the storyline, and they weren't content with Sisters of Silence or Sisters of Battle because they didn't fit their point of view correctly, being that the Sister of Silences are silent and the Sisters of Battle are nuns with guns for this. Amazon actually wanted female Space Marines to be part of the story. GW apparently hit back very hard, and the compromise was female Custodes here. Another rumor is Henry Cavill, who is, I'll say, the figurehead of this movement for Warhammer and Amazon and the show line there. And honestly, I'm pretty happy he's involved. He's pissed, but he's not backing out. Whether he's not backing out due to contractual reasons, we don't know. This is all rumor here. But also, GW has no intention of releasing female models yet for this. And finally, there is rumor of a boycott of GW. But then again, there is always a boycott of GW for one reason or another.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumors that are going around on this particular topic, and everybody is an armchair quarterback, or everybody has heard from a person who's heard from a person, or somebody that works for GW, blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, those are all just rumors, right? And I think I'm not going to speak too much to rumor because I don't like going down that rabbit hole. I prefer to stick with what I know, whether it's from my own, professional background, my own time in the hobby, going back to Road Trader, etc., and things like this. At the end of the day, this is all rumor. Take it with a grain of salt. It could literally be just made up by anybody.
Yeah. Okay, and then on to potential reasons. And again, this is very short. It's been pretty obvious that there has been an increase in inclusivity, in GW policies. We've seen that slowly creep in throughout the different game systems, and I think this is just a general factor of the increase we've seen in the Western world there, okay? And also, Games Workshop has heavy investment from Vanguard and BlackRock, which are renowned for pushing these policies in the companies that they invest in or control here. These are some of the potential reasons. I think probably some of the main ones.
And I could agree with a lot of this, to be quite honest with you. So before I get into my long-winded reason why, let me just give a little bit of background. So I work for a very, very large MNC who happens to be number one in their particular industry. And before that, two other MNCs that were number one in their respective industries. And I do procurement, I do sourcing, I do supply chain. And as a result of those activities, I'm actually heavily involved in what's called ESG, so environmental, social, governance, right? So this is everything from diversity to environmental issues, all these different kinds of things. It's a fact that companies that are heavily involved in this kind of thing tend to be more successful than those that are not. Whether or not you're whatever side of the fence you are on this, I'm speaking strictly from a data perspective, right? There's a lot of data out there from third parties such as McKinsey, any of the big four consulting firms, all these kinds of things, and you can even do your own research through investor relations and stuff like this. But companies that tend to get involved in this as part of their way of doing business do tend to outperform their peers that don't. So from that perspective, I could totally understand if somebody like Vanguard or BlackRock or the leadership of GW or whoever else were going down this particular agenda, because actually from a business perspective, in some cases, it makes sense. And when I say in some cases, because the whole situation, if you look at what happened with Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch, and the way that situation was handled improperly, those are examples of when it can blow up in your face when it's done actually incorrectly. But for the most part, again, the data suggests that companies that are involved in ESG do outperform their peers. So again, businesses are in business to make money, hence the reason why somebody might go this direction.
Yeah. And I think we're going to move into the more, well, the bigger part of this discussion, and that's our opinions. And I think I'd like to start with, I think some parts that I think both Jason and I can agree on here. The first part is Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar, 30k, any of the systems. It's made by GW, but it's your game, guys. Play it as you like. There have always been people who have sculpted the female or male versions of things that are already being released. Again, it's your army. You do as you like. I've seen actually some amazing sculpts of female Space Marines, and there's STLs of Female Custodes online for people who wish to play it as is, who aren't following the lore per se. Do what you like as long as the person across the board understands and is okay with it. And even if they're not, you don't have to play those people. This is your hobby, okay? Also, as Jason alluded to earlier on, this is not the first retcon that's ever been done by Games Workshop. It's likely, and all honestly, not going to be the last. The most recent one we've seen in 30k is they basically retconned in Mark 6 to be universal in the 30k space, where everybody has it, as in opposed to the books and the lore previously. It was only for the newer legions here, okay? Going on to
Yeah, and
yeah, go on. Sorry.
sorry.
No.
No, I was just gonna. Yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, I'm in agreement with everything that you say, right? Like, if I can, you've probably, if you've listened to any of our podcasts, you've probably heard me say several times, I don't care what you do with your dudes. I care what I do with mine, right? And from my perspective, I'm always going to do my best to kind of fit the lore. I'm going to do my best to not put 40K stuff into a 30K army, but you do you, right? Like, I don't judge those people that choose to do that. And I would never say no to somebody that does that. And as we also like to say here on Far East Wargaming, I mean, the most important thing is show effort, right? Show effort. And if somebody's put hundreds of hours and so much time and effort in making their army unique or female or whatever else it is, go for it, right? Like, that kind of effort can only be applauded, right? And to me, a lot of this whole debate about custodies and female custodies and whatnot, it's making a mountain out of a molehill, in my opinion.
Yes. We at Forest Wargaming, we've had modifications. I'm actually a big fan of 3D printing, and I print parts to help make my army fit what I think it should fit, or what I believe sometimes is missing from Games Workshop. Be pro 3D printing or not 3D printing, it's, again, your army, you do it as you like there, okay? GW has their stance, you as a gamer have your own stance. What I'll say personally from just watching this unfold is I'm not happy with Games Workshop once again for how they've released this. Retcons have been done before, but this was a very significant hot topic retcon that they tried to sneak in by just adding a tiny piece of text in the lore of this codex. And I'm still waiting to get my hands on the codex to read it myself. Again, we've seen segments all over there. But I just don't like how GW took their response, or how they're still currently handling consumer complaints, or the lack of acknowledgement that there are consumer complaints, because the way they've doubled down on this here. They're not allowing comments that are negative in any way, critical in any way on any of their social media platforms. And again, it's their prerogative to do so. But how do you get feedback to Games Workshop? And the better question is, since they're doing this, do they even care about your feedback? This is about the community. This is a community game here. And is it what the community wanted? Is it what the community needed? To me, I think that, look, there are strong female characters in the Games Workshop lore. There always have been. We have Sisters of Silence. We have Sisters of Battle. We have female Inquisitors in the books who are extremely powerful female characters. I'm not sure we needed female transhumans here. So that be Custodes or Space Marines. Just because, who is the target audience for this? Are people going to buy this? And again, it's a Games Workshop thing of, Games Workshop have always said they are a models company. They are not a games company. They're here to sell models. So why do this if you're never going to make a model for this here? And I don't care either way personally for this. I don't play Custodes. And two, even if they had female versions of them, I probably never would use those models for this. I just think both sides of the community have handled this very bad. And it's always because there's the loudest voices are the ones you hear. The loudest on the downside and the loudest on the, well, pro side and the con side. I won't say downside and upside because they're just different sides of the same coin here. I will say that I have seen some things that I really don't agree on. And I don't like calling people out. But Bell of Lost Souls, what I saw the article there, to me was just wrong. And it blanket calling people bigots, to me, is just not part of what we want as a community here. We're all entitled to our opinion, whether that be pro or con there.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you say, in the sense of, I honestly don't care. Like, this is like a non-topic to me. You do you. We talked about it earlier in this podcast. We talked about it in other podcasts. We talked about it personally, and if you come to our events and everything else, right? You do you. This is your hobby, right? So to me, all this angst and wailing and shit posting all over the internet and everything else is just, I don't understand people that do that. First of all, I just don't. I don't understand it. Right? You can disagree, you can dislike, you can be unhappy, you can say it's a retcon, you can do whatever. But if this brings you so much angst and stress in what's supposed to be a fun, enjoyable hobby, I don't know. I guess maybe reassess your life. Again, I don't know, because I'm not the kind of person that goes online and does this kind of stuff, because again, it's just a non-issue to me. Um, I tend to view a lot of things I try to be as subjective as possible, and I try to view a lot of things in the context of, again, my experience in business, my experience as somebody that's been in the hobby since the Rogue Trader and whatnot. I can actually see why they would do this, even if they would never release a model. And kind of building on your point about how they've said that they were a model company, not a game company. Well, it's obvious that they're also becoming, and have become for some time, an IP-driven company. Hence the reason why something like this might happen. Because for the IP, if you want to branch out further into TV, movies, merchandising, whatever else it is, you're going to want to appeal to the broadest spectrum of customers possible. You are. It's a fact. I mean, that's business. And any business that says, I only want to cater to angry neckbeards that don't want to accept change is probably not actually going to be in business for too long, right? They're going to want to continue to grow their customer base for whatever reason. So again, I don't know. I mean, my opinion on this, I'm almost in some ways disappointed that we even devote this much time on a podcast to this particular topic, because to me, it's a non-issue. But again, you do you. It's your world, whatever. And if you don't want to play with people because they happen to have female models on the table, hey, that's your prerogative. But I'll never be that way. But again, I understand and respect people that have a different opinion. The other thing that I look at from a business perspective, and you touched on it earlier, Rich, which is, I'm not sure who is the public relations or community relations department at GW, who is the governmental affairs department, if they even have such a thing. Do they have an ESG point of contact, or a person or a committee or a function within the business? But to me, this is just, again, coming back to your point, the way it has been handled is a textbook case of how not to handle something. Right? Not accepting feedback is never good. Banning people for expressing their opinion, as long as it's done, it's not in a personal, attacking, or, unprofessional manner, it's not good. Slipping things in the way that consistently happens with GW, again, these are examples of how not to do something from a customer relations or corporate affairs point of view, or corporate communications point of view. So I think that is probably something that also should be addressed. But because I'm not an insider at GW, I don't even know if this function exists. But, this could have probably been handled a lot better.
Yeah, I want to circle back around to what you were talking about for the IP there. And I understand you want to always broaden your consumer base. But the fact is, Miniature Wargamings has a very specific demographic of people who play this. And the lore itself is appealing to more, but I'm very worried for the lore on how it's going to evolve, especially when it's been taken up by companies such as Amazon and Netflix, because we've seen other great lore franchises tank or lose their core community's support when they have med new things. You can look at Disney and what they've done with Star Wars. You can look at the Lord of the Rings franchises after after they started doing, I think, Rings of Power, which didn't do so well. In the past, there was also things like the Shannara Chronicles, and I love the books. Not a huge fan of the way they did the series themselves. But in adaptation to new mediums, and this being media here, and movies or TV shows, they are trying to appeal to a wider audience. But there's a very fine line between making it appealing to the new audience and alienating the actual audience who originally wanted to watch it.
Totally agree. But I guess my response to that would be, if we go back over the course of a few years and we look at Age of Sigmar, right? I'm going to give specific examples of to illustrate my point, which I'll come to in just a moment. people freaked out when Age of Sigmar was released, and I think nobody would argue that the release and the way it was done was probably not done as well as it should have been. But Fantasy Battle was dying. Financially, it was dying. The company was suffering. And if you actually look, there's a fantastic article on Goonhammer that just came out a few days ago that actually gives you the whole history of this. And I highly recommend you go there and read it. Age of Sigmar is doing better than Fantasy Battles ever did in terms of like industry metrics. It's a top 5 miniatures game now. Fantasy Battle never was. Okay. So that is an example of how change can be good. All right. Getting rid of some of the uncomfortable aspects of the lore in the past, whether it was human bombs or direct linkage to Nazi imagery and these different kinds of things. Those are examples of good change that actually benefited the game and benefited the system. If you look at the uproar over when they released those novels for kids in the Warhammer 40K and the Age of Sigmar universe, they were obviously targeted at preteens. There was a lot of angst about this and a lot of wailing, and people were complaining about, what are you doing to my game, and you're making it more for children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you take a look at all these examples and the most recent examples over probably the last 4 or 5 years, GW as a company financially is doing better than it ever has. That's a fact, right? So I totally agree with the opinion about retcons, and I totally agree with, who needed this when nobody was asking for it. And I totally agree with all those points. But if you look at it strictly from a business perspective, I don't think anybody could logically say that many of the changes that they've made over the last few years haven't been successful. So business hat on, I get it. I totally get why they do it, and they're probably making a lot more money based on some of the decisions that they've made, even at the risk of alienating the core part of the audience. Now, do I recommend that you continue to handle these kinds of situations the way they seem to be handled, as we've already talked about? No, I don't. There's definitely a much better way to do this, and you're absolutely right. You got to walk that fine line between growth and reaching new customers and this kind of thing versus alienating the people that got you there in the first place. And I mean, I don't sit in that seat. And I definitely feel for those people that do, because it's going to be really difficult to figure out how you can actually walk that fine line without tanking things in the process.
Yep, I love this game. I love the community, especially the community we've built here at Far East Wargaming. And I think it's always been about inclusivity. Let's face it, we're a lot of geeks here, and so we gotta hang out with our own geeks. And so we build our communities around common goals. For me personally, when I first got back into this, I was first introduced to Age of Sigmar and the new Warhammer 40k, and honestly, it didn't appeal to me in any way until I was introduced to Warhammer 30k, which was running off slightly updated 7th ed rules, and that brought back to me my nostalgia and what I enjoyed about what my preconceived notion of Warhammer was. And though we've had some updates, I'm still around, still enjoying this. We can and ah about rules and all this stuff. The lore, I've loved the way they've done everything for the Horus Heresy, the ending. I've still got to read the last book, but I can't complain about any of that. GW has always pushed the envelope for pricing, and I think part of this is coming to a tipping point soon of how much people are willing to pay even now. We've talked about pricing on the channel before in our Heresy Thursdays, especially with the new Solar Auxilia and these new Legion Imperialis things coming out, whether they're actually now pushing too far over spending appetites for their community here. But it's a fine line that GW has to walk themselves. What my biggest concern is, I do not want to see GW do a major mistake like Anheuser-Busch did with Bud Light, because it will tank something I absolutely love, and I don't want to see that happen. And I don't mind communities having opposing opinions, and I'm actually a fan of listening to all of them, whether I agree with them or not, because just being head in the sand and saying the other side doesn't matter is it's just not a great position to take.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I really love your point as well. probably the last thing that I'll say about, you don't want to see them make a mistake because of how much love and everything that we have and passion we have for the hobby. And I totally agree with that, right? Nobody wants to see this thing fail whatsoever. Um, I don't know, probably the last thing I'll say, my own personal example, I don't play 40K for a reason, even though I played it from Rogue Trader all the way up through 8th. I stopped playing it because I didn't agree with the way the game was going and the direction it was going and the way it was going, and that's just me, right? But I was able to do that in an adult, rational way and just simply don't play it anymore, right? But I can still get enjoyment out of the modeling and buying the models and painting the models or reading the books or doing all these different kinds of things, right? So I guess what I'm basically just trying to say is be an adult about all this. You do what makes you happy. Don't waste your time and energy on ranting online and all these. It's just a waste, right? It's a waste of your time. And put your effort and into the things that make you happy, and put your effort into the parts of the hobby or the parts of the industry that make you happy as well. And that's all I'll say about that. And I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, I think honestly that's a good end to today's Heresy Thursday podcast. For those who stayed tuned, look, let us know constructively and politely in the comments your opinions there. Look, I'm happy to hear all of them. Agree or disagree with their retcon or the direction Games Workshop is headed. Everyone's opinion is valid here. You've heard our opinions, and I hope you respect them as well. From me, Richard, at Far East Wargaming, thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Absolutely, and thanks for sticking around. Thanks for being patient with us as well. We are going to be working on some bat reps this weekend, so definitely look out for those coming very soon, and we will catch you on the next one.